Done too soon. A very bad high. And not too far from here. We'll unleash our brains together on these three straight ahead on the Use Your Head podcast. This is the Use Your Head podcast. I'm your host, John McLean, welcoming you in and thanking you for spending this half hour as we exercise our brains together. Our God-given ability to use our heads to unpack the issues of the day, where we unabashedly reject the notion that others should do our thinking for us. You know, if we stay in the game, if we care enough to be engaged and not to just throw our hands up and say, oh, whatever, I'll just float down the river with all the other, whatever. No, we have the ability and we have the responsibility, frankly, to use our heads and to look at the issues of the day, to be involved and to know what we think, to have courage of our convictions in some cases. In all cases, I'll say. Found three topics. By the way, happy Easter to you. That's coming up in a few days. This is Holy Week. We'll talk more about that toward the end of the program today. But I pray and hope that you're having a great week wherever you are. You can communicate with me. I don't usually say us, but that's what you say on the shows. There's just me. And you can communicate with me at john@useyourheadpodcast.com. I get emails from you from time to time, and I appreciate it. Whatever you want to say, if you just want to say, I have a topic idea for you, or why don't you ever talk about this, or you're wrong about this and here's why, or I hate this show, or whatever you want to say. Hopefully it's nice stuff, but I can take it all. Let me know. I love to interact with you at john@useyourheadpodcast.com. So what we do here, if you're a newbie and if you are welcome, is I will take three items that I found in my week as I peruse the web looking for interesting stories and what's going on around me, and sometimes it's downright weird. But I find a few and that I think might be fun to kind of unpack. And usually in these articles, there'll be some opinion making and some ideas shared. And sometimes I'll agree with them, sometimes not. But the exercise is not designed to convince you that I'm right. Far from it. In fact, I would say the opposite is true. I don't want you to take my word for it either. I want you to use your head. And if you want to share with me what you think about anything we talk about here, john@useyourheadpodcast.com is the email address. And without further ado, let's go to topic number one. Done Too Soon. That was a Neil Diamond song back in the day. I'm a big Neil Diamond fan, by the way. Totally off topic, but that's where I kind of robbed this from Neil. Done Too Soon. Found an article at SpectrumNews1.com. This is out of the state of Ohio. And I think Dayton, in fact, is where it's from. Cassidy Wilson writes this article. It's called Gen Z and Millennials Facing Burnout at Earlier Age. Hence the name Done Too Soon. Well, this caught my eye for obvious reasons. Burnout is a common thing we talk about. So Cassidy Wilson writes this. It's that feeling of not being motivated to get the job done. Burnout hits home for many people. But now, new data shows the newest generation of workers is experiencing that burnout far sooner than ever before. Gen Z and millennials reported feeling burnout at a much earlier age than past generations, and one of the top stressors reported was finances. For students and young people who are going to college and leaving college with loans of $200,000, $300,000, it's unbelievable, said Deepak Sarma, inaugural Distinguished Scholar, Public Humanities at Case Western Reserve University. Sarma thinks younger generations are burning out quicker because of the pressure put on students at a much younger age. They said past generations had more freedom to take a few years to figure out what they wanted to do with their future. Whereas the stress level here is astronomical, and the orientation toward making it in Ivy Leagues begins when as soon as the kid is 6, 7 years old, Sarma said. A poll of 2,000 adults from Talker Research examined how the increasing stress of the past decade has affected Americans across generations. It found the average American experiences peak burnout at 42 years old. But it looks very different for Gen Z and millennial respondents who said their stress levels reached a peak when they were 25 years old. Scott Gespondel is a psychiatrist for Ohio Health. He said he absolutely sees younger generations facing burnout earlier than ever before. This term burnout is usually a syndrome used to describe three characteristics: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and decreased effectiveness at work, Gespondel said. Gespondel said many people who experience burnout also suffer from mental health issues. And he said social media is a big reason why. It increases our feelings of anxiety and depression at times. It has an addictive component to it for things like generating likes and the dopamine release that drives you to have more engagement, Gespondel said. Gespondel had said he advises his patients who may be feeling burnout to be mindful of how much time they're spending on their devices and prioritizing real-life connections and activities they enjoy. That's the end of the article. That's rare for us. Usually we quit for the end in the interest of time. But that's the whole thing. Great write-up here by Wilson. Again, this is from Spectrum News 1 out of Ohio. There's two arguments made in the article, right? The first one is from this scholar, Deepak Sarma, who basically says that's pressure. See, it's the pressure the pressure's enormous. That more pressure on these young generations than the previous generations. And then, of course, this psychiatrist, Scott Gespondel, is saying, well, it's really more an issue of mental health issues, depersonalization and so forth. So kind of a twofold argument here. Nice to hear both. First of all, when I used my head on this, sorry, but I don't buy the pressure argument. We've talked about this before. You hear this a lot. Oh, you people don't understand what it's like to be a young person in the 21st century. It's just so much pressure. I mean, from the day I was born, I've been forced to, you're going to go to the Ivy League and you're going to be a doctor or you're going to, pressure, pressure, pressure. Let me tell you something, young people. That's not new. Okay, you don't have a license on pressure to succeed. I'm a Gen Xer and I felt pressure to succeed from the earliest memories of school. My parents drilled into me, you got to make sure and get a good education because the world out there is tough. And because your parents want you to live a good life, right? They don't want you to struggle, and they want you to understand that your life, in terms of your financial health, right, and the fact if you're going to have a home and have something to drive and take a vacation, those types of things, you're going to depend on the effort you put in. All right, that's the ethic. And so that often manifests itself as pressure. Okay? So, I mean, that is not new. And, never mind the generations back before we had computers and stuff to do. I mean, there was pressure to succeed or you starved. So I don't buy the pressure argument. Okay, save that one. But I think the second argument is much closer to accurate. I saw a term in this that I don't know that I've ever seen before from Scott Gespondel, who's the psychiatrist who gives the second argument. He's a psychiatrist for Ohio Health. He lists as one of three characteristics that he looks at as part of the burnout syndrome as depersonalization. And I saw that word and I underlined it. Depersonalization. Amen to that. That term encompasses so much of a lot of the pathology of what's happening to people today. It's the fact that our person is being removed or is losing its authenticity in favor of something on a screen somewhere. We laugh and we say, well, that's my online persona. Well, if you're not careful, that will start to encroach and overlay into your real life. This happens to actors a lot. When you're super popular, you hit it big in Hollywood or whatever, and you're super popular, well, you start to get old and the new, more handsome, more talented person comes along and you get pushed to the side. You kind of lose who you are. If you don't have that fame and recognition and all of that, you can get depressed. And some of these people, sadly, go so far as to take their own lives. And we've heard lots of tragic stories of that happening with people like that. It is a real thing. And so depersonalization, that was a huge, gold star for that. I think that's a great analysis. He also talks of emotional exhaustion, which, I can see that, and decreased effectiveness at work. Everywhere you look, noses and phones. Go to the airport sometime. Noses and phones. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't, check up on the news or check through your email real fast. But sitting there, I've seen people as soon as they sit down in a chair, If they make it that far, the first thing they do is reach for that pocket or purse, and they pull out that phone and they stick their nose in it wherever they are. And a lot of cases, especially with the younger generations, we're talking about Gen Z and their predecessors, the millennials, it's social media because they've grown up with this. And I've talked about this before. As a Gen Xer, social media is still super weird to me. I still don't get it. I've tried to get it. I don't get it. But the younger generations get it because that's been a part of their life, just like the dial telephone was for me. And they can't conceive of a world without it. And I'm sympathetic to that. I'm not saying that they're all wrong and you should, buck although I think it might be healthy to do that. Look, it's not going away. It's here to stay. But I think one of the major reasons, and this psychiatrist, Scott Gespondel, has hit on this, is this depersonalization that happens with the noses in the phones and using social media to create a persona that is maybe something closer to what we wish we really had. And then that can start to encroach and cause mental health problems. And it's taking its toll. It's taking its toll. When people are saying I'm burned out and they're 25 years old, I didn't hardly even start a career until then. But they're saying they're burned out by the time they're 25 years old. This is scary. And look, I try my best not to pick on young people. I love them. Look, they're our future. And they're different, and they have different ways of looking at things, but they're important. And we need to try to, as a culture, to try to understand one another. And so I try to be as sympathetic as I can in my lack of understanding sometimes about what these people are going through, this pressure. But I'm thinking, look, this guy's hit it on the head. You lose yourself in this stuff. One thing that I'll mention before we move on to topic number 2 about this, I don't want to beat this to death. But I will tell you, I don't know if you're a golf fan, but there's been a big story this week about the Masters. Okay, the Masters is one of the majors on the golfing circuit. Happens out in Georgia, very exclusive. You got to be somebody to even be in this tournament. And it is a big deal. And they have such strict rules there that cell phones are not permitted. So if you're lucky enough to get tickets to go to the Masters, and that's not easy to do, if you're in that big crowd, you can't have your cell phone. It's not permitted. And what you end up seeing, and it was palpable this year because there's lots of drama in a golf championship like this, over $4 million and a green jacket is at stake here and a lot of other things. So it's a big deal. When you see the crowds and no one has their phones out, no one's looking at the world through their video camera, like so often happens. When you go to baseball games, that's what's going on. Not at the Masters. And some keen observers watched this and noticed how much more engaged the spectators were as they were watching the drama unfold, this human drama that is championship golf. And if you're not into it, you don't get it. I'm sorry. Not everybody does, and that's okay. But it's one of those things where when you remove the glass from between what's real and your eyes, it can have a dramatic effect on how you process the world around you. And I think it's a very good idea, if at all possible, if you can manage to do it, to minimize the time you look at the world through your smartphone. I think that will go very far into helping you, millennial or Gen Zer, to avoid early burnout. This is the Use Your Head podcast, Holy Week edition. John McLean with you. Thanks for being along. Am I hoarse? Do I sound hoarse, of course? I might be. It's been windy here. I just feel like I sound a little hoarse here. I'm not sure. Feeling all right. Anyway, just wondering. Great topic for number 2, a very bad high. This one was kind of scary. I usually have a scary one. Forgive me for that. But sometimes the news is scary. I found this one at foxnews.com in their health column. This one is going to hit home for a lot of folks, a lot of families. Here's the article written by Melissa Rudy. She writes, "Diabetes rewires the brain in surprising way, study finds." All right, here's what she says. Diabetes is known to cause many medical issues, from heart disease to vision problems, and now a new study suggests It could also impact memory and other cognitive functions. After observing brain activity and behavior in rodent models, researchers at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas determined that type 2 diabetes can rewire the brain in ways similar to early onset Alzheimer's disease. Ugh. Diabetes may be altering the brain similarly to early stages of Alzheimer's disease, said lead researcher and UNLV psychology professor James Hyman in the release. Further research is needed, but these findings have the potential to help researchers unlock clues to improve diagnostic or treatment strategies for the disease. The study was funded by the National Institutes of Health and published in the Journal of Neuroscience. Previous studies have shown that people with type 2 diabetes have a higher risk of developing neurodegenerative disorders. The reason the researchers hypothesized is that high blood sugar levels may impact the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, a part of the brain that is involved in cognitive and emotional functions, according to a UNLV press release. The ACC is linked to key cognitive processes like motivation, decision-making, goal tracking, pleasure-seeking, reward processing, and regulation of emotions, according to the researchers. In people with diabetes, high blood sugar impairs reward signals from the hippocampus, the part of the brain that controls memory and learning, to the ACC. Rewards or achieving goals are important to helping us make future decisions, so if our brains are responding differently, it's likely our future decisions will be different, Hyman told Fox News Digital. This has big implications for those managing their type 2 diabetes, since compliance with testing and lifestyle changes are key aspects. This could also explain why it is so hard for many people to stick with new diets and exercise regimens, Hyman noted, because their brains don't respond to normally rewarding events due to the disease. This knowledge can help people persevere and remain diligent since their failures are not due to personal weakness, but altered brain physiology. All right, there's more here. We'll stop there. Oh my goodness, this frightened me. Okay, speaking of mental health, right? We were just talking about that in the previous topic. This is scary. There are more people in this country struggling with blood sugar control than ever. I mean, type 2 diabetes is a big business. How many commercials do you see with someone, dancing around to a jingle talking about their A1C or their blood sugar? I mean, I don't know if there's anyone now that doesn't know someone that has type 2 diabetes or doesn't have. It is an epidemic, and many times it's caused by obesity or poor diet, or both, often both. And yes, some people are more prone to it. We're talking, remember, about type 2 diabetes. Type 1 is the one you're born with, where, type 2 is more something that comes on, which is a very dumbed down explanation, but look, believe me, I know. Okay. And you can't see me. There's a reason I didn't go into television, but I have struggled with my weight throughout my life. I've been thin and I've been not so thin. And then I've been thin again and then not so thin again. And up and down the yo-yo I go. There are many, many reasons for this. And, I'm not here to, do a intervention or anything. But what I'm saying is we're all in this together, humans, fellow humans. And it is tough to stay motivated, to stay in shape. And I think the older you get, the tougher it gets. And that's not an excuse. That's just fact. It's harder to exercise when your joints hurt. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Look, it's hard to stay motivated, to stay in shape, much less in control of some kind. But I'll tell you this, and this was where, and I used my head, this was where I was left with this sick feeling. If you've ever had a loved one struggle with Alzheimer's disease or dementia or something similar, or if you've ever been around someone that struggles with that, it is at the same time horrifying and heartbreaking. To be with someone, especially someone you care about, who has no idea who you are, no idea who they are, maybe, no idea where they are, no idea who they can trust. And it is unspeakably heartbreaking and terrifying. And, if you've ever been in that situation, if what these doctors are suspecting is true, And, this research, fleshes out what they think, and they're testing this now, but it's looking like they may be right. Look, I've looked for many reasons or many ways to motivate myself to get into shape. And some of them have worked a couple of times, but it's usually more along the lines of, first of all, there's a faith-based, I'm supposed to, God wants me to take care of my body. He created it. He owns it. I'm the manager of it. I should be taking care of it. And when I don't do that, I'm not making him happy. That's a huge motivation. Having less joint pain, sleeping better, being more active, all of these things, feeling better about myself. You hear hundreds of motivations and they all work differently on different people. But this one, if somebody were to say to me, listen, John, if you, or listen, whoever, not just me, but whoever, if you don't get type 2 diabetes, if you manage and don't go down that road, it will greatly reduce your chance of getting Alzheimer's or something similar, or flipping that on the other, on its head. You will get it if you become diabetic. Your chances are excellent that you're going to end up that way. That is serious motivation, because like I say, if you've ever seen someone end their life, this way, like the end of their life is a state of Alzheimer's or dementia or something, it is terrible. It's terrible. It's heartbreaking. And so I don't know about you, my friend, but I'm willing to do almost anything to avoid that type of diagnosis later in life. We'll keep an eye on this. Eat healthy tonight. This is the Use Your Head podcast. By the way, I forgot to mention this note that I jotted down. I'm not suggesting that all type 2 diabetics is behavioral. It's not always. Sometimes you have it and you just do. And I pray that you'll weather the storm okay. But for those of us that can control it, that's pretty good motivation. All right, topic number 3 on the podcast today. The email address, by the way, if you want to rip me to shreds, if I said something wrong, is john@useyourheadpodcast.com. All right, not too far from here. This article is a little touchy-feely, but it's something I felt led to talk about. And it's because it's very relevant to something that I experienced just today. By the way, I say today. Today is Tuesday the 15th, tax day. Notice I didn't do a tax topic today, because if you haven't filed them, it's too late. Anyway, I found this article on Breitbart. Cuba bans Christians from celebrating Palm Sunday tradition. This was posted today by Christian Caruso for Breitbart. Here's what the article says. The communist regime of Cuba banned Christians in Havana from celebrating the traditional solemn Stations of the Cross on Sunday, Cuban outlets reported. We hereby inform that the solemn Stations of the Cross announced and prepared by the Vicariate for tomorrow, Palm Sunday at 6 o'clock p.m. from Linea to Lateran has been suspended because the authorities have not approved it, said Cuban priest Lester Rafael Zayas Diaz of the Sacred Heart of Jesus Parish in Havana, and it was announced on social media over the weekend. Catholics commemorate the Passion, Death, and Resurrection of Jesus Christ during Holy Week, an observance which will run this year from April 15th, which is Palm Sunday, to April 20th, Easter Day. Palm Sunday celebrations, which commemorate the arrival of Christ to Jerusalem before he was crucified, involve the blessing and distribution of palm branches used to welcome Jesus as he entered Jerusalem. All right, time out here. So depending on where you fall on the spectrum, whether you're leaned toward the more Catholic side like I do, I'm an Anglo-Catholic, Anglican, but we practice the Catholic faith, or you may be more evangelical, charismatic, what have you, Palm Sunday's probably familiar to you. Oftentimes the palms are waved, or some type of activity involving palms. Hosanna is sung. This is pretty common across worldwide Christian tradition. So this may be familiar to you. Time back into the article. The Stations of the Cross that the Cuban communists prohibited the parish from celebrating is a Catholic procession that commemorates Jesus' last day on earth prior to resurrection on Easter Sunday. Some Christians observe this practice on Good Friday, which marks the crucifixion of Jesus. Neither the Castro regime nor the Sacred Heart of Jesus Parish has explained the reasons behind the prohibition of the procession. Last week, Father Zayas Diaz shared pictures of the procession's rehearsal before it was canceled by the Castro regime. The procession is on the complete list of events that the Archdiocese of Havana planned for this year's Holy Week in the Cuban capital. Sunday's prohibition marks the second year in a row that the Castro regime banned Catholics from celebrating Holy Week processions in the country. In 2024, the regime banned Christians in Havana and several other cities from celebrating that year's Stations of the Cross and other Holy Week activities. Prior to the 2023 and 2024 prohibitions, the Stations of the Cross procession was reportedly celebrated without interruption for over 11 years and had only been suspended due to the Wuhan coronavirus pandemic. All right, we'll stop there. There's some more here, but that's the gist of it. So, all right, let's talk about Cuba for a minute. Communist regime. All right, Cuba has been communist since the revolution happened in the 60s. And I've just say this up front, I've never been to Cuba. All right, I may go sometime. It'll be ministry related if I do, but I have not been to Cuba. However, just today at my church parish, we celebrated a Eucharist today called the Eucharist of Collegiality, where the clergy gather from around the diocese and we share the Lord's Supper together in service, and they renew their vows, and they also receive holy oils to use in the practice of their office throughout the year. It's very wonderful. One of the best parts is all these clergy get together and reconnect and how you've been doing, and they pray for one another, and then we have a lunch after. It's beautiful. And as a postulant to holy orders, I attended and was really met some fabulous people. Anyway, that's not the point, except to say that one of the bishops there is a gentleman named Bishop John. He's from Dallas. Bishop John has a ministry in Cuba. He has a heart for Cuba. He's been there many, many times. And in fact, every year we gather up supplies that the government has allowed him to physically take in suitcases. Things like Tylenol, Band-Aids, things that are virtually impossible to get down there because their economy is a mess because it's communist, and communism equals mess. Economic mess, social mess, mess. And yet there are people down there that are in need and that are in need of hope and help. And so Bishop John travels down there. He works with the churches down there and has built a good relationship in parts of the government that regulate church. And yes, that's what communism does. It regulates everything. And so he is able to have a visa and go down there and do his work. And as long as he plays by the rules, which he does, then he can help people. He told us today that the economy of Cuba is continuing its collapse. But he also said something that was very encouraging. He says the church, despite the collapsing economy, is doing well. People are seeking hope. And in a communist regime, there's no such thing as hope. It's hopeless. It's colorless. This grand dream of making everybody equal and everybody happy and sitting in a field called utopia is not real. Not on this earth. And Bishop John talked about the amazing and courageous work that he and his fellow clergy are doing down there to help bring people hope. The Stations of the Cross is something we do at our parish all throughout the season of Lent. Every Wednesday, in fact, we'll walk the stations. Sometimes we do it outdoors. We have stations outdoors and indoors. If you have the opportunity to do this, it's very meaningful because you're walking. If you can place yourself there in the footsteps of Christ and the experiences that he endured, frankly, on the last day of his life here in his earthly ministry. Really, really touching stuff. So, look, the people in Cuba are struggling. They all, think about not being able to get a bottle of Advil. You can't. We can go to, one of the warehouse stores and buy a gigantic bottle that would last us years for, it makes sense to help these folks. So pray for Cuba. That's my Holy Week thing. One last thing before I let you go. We got about a minute to go. I want to say this to you. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, Holy Week, what are you talking about? What, Easter, crucifixion? Why? Send me an email, john@useyourheadpodcast.com, and just say, I don't know what you're talking about. I would be more than happy to share with you the greatest story ever told. And it can be life-changing. And in fact, it will be life-changing. Always has been. Happy Easter to you. Hope you have a blessed week. Thank you for joining me on the Use Your Head podcast. More fun coming next week, God willing. Be safe. See you then. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.